Well, welcome to Don't Know Much About, where it always begins with a question. Today, I want to take a closer look at anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism, specifically at how the public condemnation of anti-Semitism is often used to launder anti-Zionism. I recently published a piece in the Times of Israel titled, "Beware Those Who Condemn Antisemitism." And the core argument here is real simple. Anti-Jewish hatred mutates. There are three distinct variants or eras of Jew hatred: anti-Judaism, anti-Semitism, and anti-Zionism. And while each takes a different form, all shares the same underlying mechanism, and that is the construction of Jews as villains or demons. In the era of anti-Judaism, Jews were demonized through religious libels, most notably as Christ killers and perpetrators of blood libel. In the era of anti-Semitism, Jews were cast as racial villains, race polluters, globalists, and traitors. And in today's anti-Zionist era, the Jew, now refracted through Israel, is demonized through seemingly political libels. They are the colonizer, apartheid state, ethnic cleanser, genocidal actor, and the charge that Zionism is racism. Today, Jews are no longer portrayed as biologically inferior or racially contaminants. As a result, when parents approach school administrators to report what they call anti-Semitism, they're often shocked to discover that the administrators don't recognize claims such as Israel is a settler colonial state as quote-unquote anti-Semitic. And strictly speaking, they're kind of right. It's not anti-Semitism, it's anti-Zionism. But anti-Zionism is still a form of Jew hatred. It simply manifests differently. Why does it look different? Because in every era, the Jew is constructed as a villain in direct opposition to whatever the society defines as moral at the time. So, for example, in the anti-Judaism era, Jews were framed as enemies of Christianity itself because Christianity was moral. And in the anti-Semitic era, Jews were framed as racial threats at a time where racial classification was not only accepted but legitimized in universities and in scientific institutions. And today, in the anti-Zionist era, Jews through Israel, because Israel's a Jewish state, are demonized by portraying the Jewish state as violating the highest moral values of our time, human rights, and the defense of the oppressed. Understanding this shift is essential. Without it, we will continue to misidentify the problem and fail to confront the hatred that has merely learned a new language. Now, it takes a catastrophic event to force a moral reckoning, one so devastating that society is compelled to confront the fact that its moral assumptions were not only wrong, but lethal. And that's what happened with the Holocaust. It took the Holocaust to make the world recognize that categorizing human beings according to race is profoundly immoral. Once anti-Semitism was exposed as deadly, it became, broadly speaking, unacceptable. And in that sense, society developed a kind of moral immune system against classical anti-Semitism. So today, when a swastika is painted, or a Heil Hitler salute is performed, or the Holocaust is denied, society largely recognizes it for what it is and rejects it. This is not to say that anti-Semitism has completely disappeared, far from it. But on the whole, the public understands the tropes and libels associated with this anti-Semitic era and knows, most importantly, they know how to name it. What society has not learned to recognize are the tropes and libels of the anti-Zionist era. And this is really not accidental, nor is it entirely a moral failure on the part of the individuals. You see, for decades, enormous resources, millions, have been poured into Holocaust education under the assumption that remembering the past would prevent future hatred of Jews. That assumption was, unfortunately, a mistake. As a result, school administrators and cultural gatekeepers often fail to recognize that labeling Israel as an apartheid settler colonial state guilty of ethnic cleansing is part of that same demonization project that defined earlier eras of anti-Judaism and anti-Semitism. These are not disconnected phenomena. They are successive mutations of the same underlying logic. And we know this because of the outcome. Wherever these libels take hold, violence against Jews follows. If anti-Zionism were merely a political critique divorced from hatred and demonization, we would not see the scale of harassment, intimidation, and violence directed at Jews today. The pattern is unmistakable. Demonization precedes destruction. It is why a young Jewish student recently shared with me that walking down the street wearing a Star of David necklace, a man yelled at her, "F you colonizer." And it's why parents share with me that their children, Jewish kids in classrooms, where these classrooms operationalize anti-Zionist libels, their kids feel as if they are targets. They feel there's been a target placed on their backs. Look, administrators face a choice. They can listen to those who are directly experiencing the effects of anti-Zionism, or they can deny that the problem exists. It is true that we have lost at least, I would say, 15, if not more, years in educating the public about the persistence of hatred towards Jews after the Holocaust, and about how this hatred now operates through entirely different tropes than those of the anti-Semitism era. But that is precisely why the Jewish community, and especially major Jewish organizations, must not shy away from speaking about anti-Zionism. They must run toward it. What is both unhelpful and deeply dangerous is the claim that anti-Zionism crosses the line into anti-Semitism. It's so not true. Anti-Zionism is the systematic demonization of Israel and of those who support its existence. It has moved from the margins into mainstream political, academic, media discourse. Treating it as a conditional or occasional problem only obscures its true function and scale. Anti-Zionism is not merely hostility toward a state, it's a worldview that treats Jewish sovereignty as uniquely illegitimate. It views Jewish defense as uniquely criminal, and as Jewish collective identity as uniquely suspect. In practice, it does not distinguish between Israelis and Jews, Zionists, Jewish institutions, or support for Israel and participation in civic life. Synagogues become Zionist targets. Hanukkah parties become Zionist targets. Jewish students become agents of apartheid and colonialism. Jewish communities become fair game. And we saw this play out just recently in Sydney, Australia. We see it being played out almost daily in the streets of New York, where Jews are accosted on the streets, or when even last spring, a young couple was murdered walking out of the Capitol Jewish Museum in Washington, D.C., the man who gunned them down yelled, "Free Palestine," a signature chant from this anti-Zionist movement. This ideology does not operate in isolation. It is produced, it is amplified, it is operationalized by convergence, and I'm sorry to say, of Islamist extremist networks and segments of the far left. These movements differ in language and tactics, but they share a common objective: the delegitimization of Israel, and by extension, the marginalization of Jews within democratic societies. Together, they pose a coordinated threat not only to Jews in Israel, but to the moral and political foundation of the free world. For years, anti-Zionism has been laundered through this euphemism of, criticism of Israel. But criticism is specific, contextual, grounded in reality. Anti-Zionism is totalizing, it's moralizing, it's demonizing, and pretending that the two are interchangeable has allowed this hate to roam free. And so here we are, return to the beginning of today's episode and ask about this relationship between anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism, and why we must move past the anti-Semitism framework if we are to properly address today's problem. Too often, those who denounce anti-Semitism simultaneously traffic in anti-Zionism, doing so with great rhetorical skill. They shield themselves by having already condemned the right kind of hatred. But if we understand that hatred of Jews mutates over time, then we can see what is happening really clearly. They're condemning a form of Jew hatred that no longer carries much power, social weight, while advancing a new one that does. This is why we must demand more. Our politicians, schools, administrators, educators must explicitly condemn anti-Zionism, not as a side issue, not as a caveat, but as the central expression of anti-Jewish hatred in our time. And here is where it gets even more sinister, dark, and dangerous. Anti-Zionist movements issue statements such as, "We condemn anti-Semitism and Islamophobia." The coupling is very clever and very intentional. Consider the recent Grenada Declaration of Principles for Combating Islamophobia and Anti-Semitism together, which condemns both Islamophobia and anti-Semitism. It's a real clever move because by pairing Islamophobia with anti-Semitism, such a declaration provides anti-Zionism with a moral shield because anti-Zionism operates openly within much of the radical Muslim world. So anyone with a zero tolerance stance towards Islamophobia is effectively barred from denouncing it. In this way, Islamophobia becomes the perfect cover for anti-Zionism. Condemning both is like, opposing racism and the fight against it in the same breath. So imagine, like, for a moment, putting out a statement such as, well, we condemn all anti-white supremacy and racism. That doesn't work because white supremacy produces racism. That is effectively what they are doing by condemning Islamophobia and anti-Semitism because anti-Zionism is produced by Islamism. This is, in fact, the signature move of groups on campus such as Faculty for Justice in Palestine. They all condemn anti-Semitism together with Islamophobia, but they are the main producers on campus of anti-Zionism, an ideology that seeks to annihilate the Jewish state, that seeks to hunt down Jews in the diaspora for the sins of Israel. So as I conclude, consider another misleading headline. I'm going to read it to you. The UN speaks against anti-Semitism, but does nothing to stop it. Well, the UN will continue to speak out against anti-Semitism and do nothing to stop it because the it here has not been properly defined. The it, of course, is anti-Zionism. The more we continue to speak out against anti-Semitism, expecting to confront the libels deployed against Israel that are costing Jewish lives, the more nothing will be done to stop it. In fact, the UN will continue to speak out against anti-Semitism as it takes very little moral courage to do so today. Folks, we need a paradigm shift from anti-Semitism to anti-Zionism. Thank you for tuning in. You can watch and listen to Don't Know Much About on Apple, Spotify. If you liked what you heard today, please like, share, spread widely. Until next time.
Don't know much about history.